Macedonia is facing constitutional changes. A working group for changing the constitution is being formed. The group should submit an initiative to the parliament, but the opposition does not want to participate or to vote to change the constitution in the next period. How to find a solution?
Well, so the fact is that you have to deal with a situation in which you are not responsible, because the problem is coming from Bulgaria. The problem is coming from the fact that there is a political instability in Bulgaria, and you have to deal with it. So, of course, to discuss the existence of Bulgarian minority, why not? Because you have already discussed that topic with Turk people, with Albanians, and so on and so on. Well, it is not a real subject to discuss that kind of amendment on the side of the national parliament. But the fact is that you are not in a safe situation with Bulgaria. And the problem, which is a legal problem, is in fact an historical problem. And the problem that you face with the parliament, it is the case in Bulgaria, in North Macedonia, but also in France. I don't think that the parliament has to deal with historical problems. So, in fact, the solution is the one that you have adopted some years ago with Bulgaria. So, to create a special committee with historians, and it is up to historians to discuss that kind of topic. But if you want to discuss an amendment saying, okay, you have to accept a Bulgarian minority in Macedonia, it is not a problem. It is not a legal problem. But the fact is that you don't deal with legal problem, you have to deal with history. And in that case, it is not to the parliament to deal with history.
Some of the Albanian parties said that there will be no unconditional support for the constitutional amendments if the issue of removing the wording 20% for the Albanian language in the constitution is not open now, when we will open the constitution for putting the Bulgarians in it. How to resolve these requests?
So the problem with 20% is not 20%, it is 19% or 21%. Just remember, when Montenegro asked to vote for its independence, the census was 53%. So just imagine that when we had to vote for the independence of Montenegro, that Montenegrins vote at 52 or 51%. So the problem is not the question of 20% or 22%. So you have the census a year ago saying that more or less you had the same level of Albanians living in Macedonia than 10 years ago, and 1% or 2% more or less. So it is a question of integration to the state administration. It is a question of how do you live inside the country, inside this country. And if Albanians think that they are well integrated, it is not a problem of 20% or 12% or 25%. And they have to accept it. If the problem is just to say that instead of 20%, we need to have 25 or 15, then it is a problem, because if you are at 14% or 24%, it means that you are not integrated. The fact is, you can discuss that kind of figure if the question is not the way how you are integrated in the country where you live. I think it is my problem. Because, for example, in France, if you want to have a discussion of with local languages, you need to have this barrier of 20%. But in my opinion, it has no sense at all. The question is to see, okay, have you got the right to learn in your own language at the primary school? Because no matter if you have 15% or 5%, it is just the right to learn in your own language. And in the same time, to earn the other languages. Because if you want just Albanian language in Macedonia, if you go to Skopje, you will have to speak in Macedonian. So it is not a problem of percentage. It is really a problem of integration and assimilation and so on and so on. And we face the same problem in France with Corsica, with Britain and so on.
Macedonia has a lot of criticism for the work of the judiciary, nepotism and corruption. What are your advices?
Well, some months ago when I visited Skopje, it was very strange to see new buildings. When you are in a country, when you have the people, the population leaving the country, it is always very interesting to see new constructions. It is a problem in Macedonia, but also in Albania, also in Serbia. And it's obvious that it is a laundry machine. So then in that case, when you face in your own city new buildings and you perfectly know that nobody will live inside, it is a problem with corruption. And in that case, when you are a single citizen, when you see that in your hometown you have that kind of situation, you can't avoid to think that people working at the local level are in that system, that you can't avoid that people working with building industry are in that system. You can't avoid the question to say, okay, where the money is coming from, because it is one thing to build, but it is another way to discuss where the money is coming from. And in that case, it's obvious that local administration and national administration have to develop that kind of anti-corruption office, because every citizen is aware of it. Just today, you know, I am just having lunch with friends, with some coming from Macedonia. And this morning, when I was taking a coffee with them, it was the first thing that we were discussing. Christian, just can you believe? I was in my hometown in Macedonia, and I saw new buildings. The problem is that when you are in the Balkan countries, you see the corruption. When you are in Italy, when you are in France, it is another topic because it is more hidden. And the problem that you face in these countries, when each citizen sees that situation, you can't avoid to make something.
How realistic is 2030 for finishing negotiations with the European Union?
Can you imagine that today we are discussing in Western Balkan countries, 6 countries, less than 20 million inhabitants. 20 years ago, when we have finished the accession of 10 applicant countries, we were discussing with 10 applicant countries, more or less 80 million people. For 10 countries, 80 million inhabitants, we have adopted this retro planning, and more or less to discuss this accession, it took more or less 7 or 8 years. So, by the way, if we have on one side this will to open the European Union to you, and if on the other side it is our own responsibility to reform our institutional our institution, of course it will be possible. But the fact is today that when we are discussing your accession to the European Union, the problem is not with you. By the way, the problem is with us, because since the time we have not adopted the change of the way how, for example, the European Council is working. It doesn't depend on you, it depends on us. So if on our side we are not able to change the way we are functioning, no way. But definitively, it is not your problem, it is our problem.